yourself, unless you take it out of your pocket, to pay for it. And Krishna himself says this in the Gita. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, there's this beautiful verse, and if I translate it very literally, you'll see it's an amazing verse. Krishna says, Evam pravartitam chakram. Literally, a wheel has been made to turn. That's a literal translation. A wheel has been made to turn. Kind of sounds Buddhist, doesn't it, or something? So, Evam pravartitam chakram. A wheel has been made to turn, and the same word chakra, it means a wheel or a cycle. Also, a cycle is made to turn. Nanuvarti atihaja, and one who does not keep the wheel turning. A wheel has been made to turn, and if you don't keep this wheel turning, the cycle turning, agayur, your whole life is aga, is an offense to the universe. Your whole life is, and the word, your whole, ayu, like Ayurveda. Ayur means your duration of life. So Ayurveda means knowledge of how to prolong life. And so aga means like an offense, like, you know, the sin demon, Agasura, devotees saying in Western Sanskrit, Agasura, the sin demon. Anyway, so aghayur, that your duration of life is simply an offense. Because indriya ramu, you simply live to gratify your senses. And Krishna says such a person, mogam, which means in vain, for nothing, futile, for nothing. And that person lives in vain, literally. Mogam partha sajivati. So look, consider what Krishna is saying, that a wheel hasn't made to turn. So what is that wheel he's talking about? It's a cycle by which we receive gifts from heaven. The rain comes, the food grows, and you can just throw in society in this analogy here. We receive so many benefits. If a human child is placed alone in the wilderness, it will, first of all, die. And even if it's kept alive, it will be an animal. It will not have human intelligence. We literally become human by social contact. If a mother doesn't touch her baby, doesn't talk to her baby, the child will neurologically just be gone. And so we literally become human within society, and so therefore we have obligations, and not to speak of our obligations to the greater community, which includes the demigods. The whole universe is actually a single society. And so what Krishna is talking about is that we receive all these benefits, and you have to pay back. You've got to give back. What's that song by George Harrison? Forgetting to give back. Isn't it a pity? So, therefore, we receive so many benefits. We are existentially within a social contract. I made that point to make the other point, that despite all of that, still, Krishna has blessed us not only to be socially dependent or socially obliged or within a social contract, but Krishna has also given us an equal dimension in which we are private, individual, and autonomous. That's real maturity, like in ISKCON. I mean, you get a lot of points for sticking with a religious institution. Because, you know, when human beings make institutions, duck for cover. So, but still, we owe it to Prabhupada. We really do owe it to Prabhupada to serve his institution. We really do owe it to him. And we owe it to the world, because history shows, if you know anything about the history of religions, you know the world will be infinitely better off with an international society for Krishna consciousness than without it. If you don't know that, you just have no clue about history and social science. So we do have that obligation. We do have that, but at the same time, Prabhupada has given us, God has given us this huge private space. We're unique. Every one of us is unique. Every one of us is a free being. Everyone is hopefully a free, rational being. So I'm in society. People may treat me this way or that way, but I have the right, I have the ability to create a great life for myself, even if I'm surrounded by, well, I won't say the word in the temple room. Starts with A, ends with E. Got it?
That's go.
I'm corrupting the Aussies. So the idea is, because that's what Krishna's saying here. You have the power and the right to surrender to Krishna. No one can stop you. If you say, well, I'm not chanting Hare Krishna because so-and-so did this to me, oh my God, get a life. Why just give people power over your life? I don't do that. I mean, I cooperate. I think I cooperate seriously with an institution. You know, I follow the rules, or appear to. Just kidding. I actually. But, I mean, probably what's the center of my own life, what really, if I tick, this is what would make me tick, is that my freedom. I love my freedom. I love my freedom. And I cooperate with society. Like, I mean, I cooperate within the Prabhupada's movement the same way I stop at red lights and go at green lights. Because it's in my rational self-interest to fulfill my social contract with the greater society and with ISKCON. It's in my rational self-interest. And I do it. But having done that, my real internal life is my life as a free, rational soul, where my happiness depends on me. If I chant Hare Krishna the right way, I'm going to have a super life. I'm going to be incredibly happy. Krishna is going to reciprocate with me. I will never give away that freedom. I will never give power over my life to anyone except Krishna. And as a rational human being, I fulfill my social contract. But it's actually that freedom, which is who we really are. And therefore, take advantage. I mean, every one of us has the most fantastic blessing. First of all, that you exist. I mean, you actually exist. That's, I mean, how can you calculate that blessing? You get to exist. And you exist forever. And you're conscious. I mean, if you existed forever and you were unconscious, that would be a bummer. But we're conscious, we exist forever, we have free will. We have free will. Every one of us can choose the life we want. No matter what society does, no matter what people tell us, okay, you can do this, you can't do that, or people can offend us, you have the power to create unlimited happiness for yourself by chanting Krishna's names without offense. And so any unhappiness in our life, you know, the Australian buck stops here. It's just, you know, any unhappiness in our life, don't look at other people. Because every one of us has the power to have a fantastic life. And if you please Krishna enough, Krishna can empower you unlimitedly. Krishna can empower you to save the world. It's totally irrelevant. It's not for people with male bodies. It's not for people with female bodies. It's not for people with a lot of Sanskrit titles after their name. It's just for anyone in any kind of body that chooses to surrender to Krishna. So we have this fantastic freedom. Think about your freedom, not about what someone else is doing, and don't fall into the trap, and it is a trap of psychological determinism. Of thinking, I have to be this way. I have to be miserable because of the way I was treated. Because you're just self-lobotomizing. I mean, why destroy yourself? You have freedom, why give it away? Why reject your own freedom? Why give up your own chance to have a great life? As if someone else had that power over you, which they don't. No one has that power over you if you choose to have a great life. Prabhupada's given you everything you need to have the life you want, if you want it. So, thank you all very much. you have any questions, please put another coin in the meter. Yes. Perhaps people that ask questions can, is there a microphone for?
Yeah. Yes. Which pastime, Krishna, in the Krishna book do you enjoy and relish reading and hearing?
I have to admit, I do not have a favorite color, ice cream flavor, or pastime. I just like Krishna, you know, and so I'll take the whole package. Yes, microphone right there.
Thank you very much. Trying to figure out. Okay. I would like to ask, in relationship to, in situations when we set up certain circumstances, particularly in family life, and
Family life?
In family life, you have, you know, wild children and so forth, and you're obviously responsible to some of the results of how they behave or how they grow up. So to what degree you're responsible, and because of course they have their own freedom
right
as well. So how is that work out?
Okay. Yeah, I'm in a similar situation because I have disciples. Or I'm sorry, it's 21st century. I have clients. And, trying to be more sensitive. So, but they are, you know, like spiritual children. And so, in my own way, I have to, obviously, I don't want to think that I did or said something that really harmed someone that took shelter of me. Actually, I'll tell you a story. One time I was with Prabhupada in 1972 in New Vrindavan, and he was getting a massage, and I was just sitting next to him out in the open air. And there were these two little kittens who were, these little kittens were kind of wrestling and playing, and they grabbed each other in a way they formed a perfect ball, like this round ball, and they just rolled. They rolled right down this little, and they rolled right into Prabhupada's lap. Wow. You know, that was 1972. I was like, ooh, an animal touched Prabhupada. And so, that's actually what I was thinking. I was sannyasi, I was 23 years old. I took sannyas several years before my brain formed fully. I mean, scientifically, yeah, because the male brain matures, if ever, a few years later. So I was thinking that, and then Prabhupada, to my great surprise, actually acted like a normal person. Because, you know, when you join movement in those days, it's like, don't do anything normal. I mean, you couldn't even wear a normal hat. You had to like have a special Indian kind of hat. So Prabhupada actually started petting the kittens. You know, just with a finger. There's these little kittens, and I was like, wow. So, and then Prabhupada looked at me because the kittens were so confident. They were just rolling around in Prabhupada's lap with absolutely no fear, you know, of us. And so Prabhupada looked at me and said, he said, if I put my head in your lap and you cut my throat, that is the greatest sin. In other words, he was saying that because these kittens had totally just taken shelter of Prabhupada, totally trusted him, he said, if I harm them in any way, that is the greatest sin. And of course, obvious applications here to, you know, cattle raising and things like that. So, but having said that, so it's when people take shelter of us, whether they're your own, you know, biological children, whether they're disciples or just a friend in need. I mean, different times in life, people in different relationships may just come to us for help. And we do our best. And then let's say we try to help someone, whoever it is, in our family or friend or whoever it may be. We try to help someone and something bad happens to them. Then you think, did I do the right thing or whatever? And you can understand that I somehow or other, being one of the Fab 11 in ISKCON, you know, one of the original gurus after Prabhupada, that I had a lot of disciples. And it's just, I got to a point personally where I think I hold myself to a reasonable standard, in the sense that I feel like I have to do my duty in a reasonably, I have to be responsible. And if I feel that I did the best I could, you know, it's just, we have human limits. But if I actually did the best I could, then I have to leave it to Krishna. If you really feel you didn't do your best, you were negligent, yeah, then feeling bad about that is probably appropriate and purifying. Prabhupada said lamentation is purification. And of course, too much lamentation just disables you. So lamentation is like salt and pepper. In the right amount, it's healthy. Yes?
Just leading on from that.
A microphone?
Hold it far away from your mouth. Sound goes let it down. Let it go. Okay. You mentioned something you said there about how we get stuck in emotional patterns, maybe because somebody hurt us earlier in our lives, and we've just got to almost touching on that. Your answer from the last question. I wonder, but how do we actually do that? I mean, I know we have to chant and everything, but how do we actually lift ourselves out of dark emotions?
Yeah, that's a very good point. How do we lift ourselves out of dark emotions, knowing that we should lift ourselves? We practice. Aristotle wrote a book on ethics called the Nicomachean Ethics, soon to be a major motion picture. And anyway, in his Nicomachean Ethics, he said that you cultivate virtue, in this case, we say the virtue of detachment, by practice. That we have to act in a certain way, and practice. And if you act in a certain way, because what you have on your side is that you, as a pure soul, have all these virtues. They're actually inside of you. And so if you act virtuously, you awaken these virtues that are already within you. They're already there. It's very interesting. If you look at the behavior that was expected of ladies and gentlemen, which was the word they used, let's say in the 19th century in England. I write books, and I've studied a lot. Jane Austen, I'm kind of famous as a big Jane Austen fan. So, but what I find interesting about, and I actually gave a lecture on Jane Austen and the Bhagavad Gita right across from her house in Charlton, Hampshire, United Kingdom, a couple of years ago. So there's so much there which is Krishna conscious. For example, in answer to your question, there's this very powerful like rule or behavior that if you are a civilized human being, that you may be suffering inside, you may be ecstatic, but you have to behave properly. You can't scream in ecstasy in the middle of a bunch of people are trying to eat their dinner and you scream in ecstasy, or you're depressed, you throw your plate against the wall and they say, "What are you doing? You don't understand." So the idea is, and Krishna talks about this all the time. I mean, this is what Krishna describes as equanimity, being equipoised. That's exactly what it means. Sometimes we have very strong emotions, positive or negative. But if you understand that you have to be a lady or a gentleman, especially when you're around other people, and so even if you're feeling strong emotions, just behave properly. And what happens is, as Aristotle pointed out, as Krishna points out, same thing, that by practicing being a well-balanced person, you actually become one. Because you are one, you're a pure soul.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, no, that's a good point. And ultimately, you're not faking it. Because let's say I don't feel happy, but I'm just gonna, I mean, imagine if I get on a plane and the flight attendant comes up to me and says, go get your own dinner. And I said, I paid a lot of money for this ticket. You don't know what I just went through. It's like, actually, I don't think I want to know what you just went through. And I bought my ticket, and you better smile. And I'm not just being insensitive. I think I actually have a right because we're engaged in a social contract. I paid money. This person is getting paid. If you don't want to smile, then don't take the salary. In other words, it's duty, or as English say, duty. I don't know how they got that pronunciation, but anyway. I just thought of some joke that's not true. So, I won't do my Cary Grant imitation. So, anyway, the idea here is that, as Krishna explains in the Gita, Krishna himself teaches this, and Aristotle, everyone teaches it, that behave as if you were in good consciousness, and you actually will be. And if we give in to dark emotions or inappropriate emotions, then they take over our life. Yes?
What if we're not really sure what is the positive way
We'll give it to positive way to
be?
Oh, yes, for additional fee, you can get access to special lectures, which I give. Anyway, you know, Prabhupada teaches massively how we should behave. Krishna teaches it. A lot of the Bhagavad Gita is behavioral psychology. You know, this is the way a civilized person behaves. If you look at, for example, Bhagavad Gita, and just look at all the items that are rated in the different modes of nature, just choose the mode of goodness. This is the attitude of someone in goodness. This is how a person in goodness behaves. We have a lot of information on that. And so we just have to, fake it till you make it. But you're not, the good news is you're not faking it, because that's really you. What you're doing when you act properly, even if inside you feel bad, is that you are choosing your real self. You are choosing to act like your real self, and you are choosing not to empower your false ego. And that's why Krishna uses almost this military term. He says, conquer yourself. Because on a battlefield, and he's talking about conquering. Because in a battlefield, you have to have courage. We have to have the courage. You know, if it's like I was taking a japa walk on a college, really nice kid, this really nice town way up in the mountains of western Texas called Alpine, Texas. So on the activity board, they had an advertisement for the skydiving club. And it said, if at first you don't succeed, do not join the skydiving club. So, I forgot what I was going to say about that. But anyway, so on a battlefield, you have to, I mean, Krishna chose to speak to Arjuna on a battlefield. They could have talked, you know, under a mango tree. They could have talked anywhere. I mean, if you look at the Mahabharata, Krishna and Arjuna talked in many different places. Like, okay, you're in a battlefield, this world war is about to start. Looks like a good time for a conversation. But the point is that Krishna chose to speak Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield because you have to be a type of spiritual warrior. You have to fight to control yourself. You have to fight to do the right thing. You have to have courage. Even though your mind is screaming at you, you will never be happy if you give up sense gratification. But we have to have the courage to believe Krishna. And so you really do have to be a spiritual, I mean, H.D.Goswami wrote books, right? Spiritual warrior. And so it's really like that. Yes.
Sometimes though, we might be, some devotees might tease us. Tease us.
My God.
What about then?
Well, then we definitely need a suicide hotline. You know, it's interesting. Sticks and stones will break my bones. Yeah, and I've got sticks and stones. Anyway, there's what's going to the cutting edge now in a lot of cognitive psychology and cognitive science is realizing that it's like the worship of the victim, the glorification of the victim. It's like, because we all want prestige. You know, that's why people get higher degrees. That's why they try to get money, buy expensive cars. But now there's like an extraordinary amount of status with society awards to the victim. So there's this competition to achieve victimhood. And for example, in America, we have a long history, like in Australia, of all these immigrant groups coming in, and you know, no one held their hand. They just fought their way up, and now they're doing very, very well. And actually, what neurological studies show, that the worst possible thing you can do to somebody is to shield and protect them from teasing, from like now in American universities, you know, just when you thought they couldn't become stupider, look again. And so they have this thing now with like safe spaces, because, you know, it's our duty. They've actually, I mean, when I was young, why do you go to college? Because you want to learn, you want to debate, you want to, you know, maybe people will expose your prejudices or your false assumptions, or you can learn new things, you know, you can reinforce the views you have, which are actually justified. You go there for, you know, to do battle intellectually and to learn. Now, no. Now you go to college, and the administration has to make sure that no one traumatizes you by disagreeing with you. Oh my God, that person has a different political view. I need a safe space. I need a counselor. I need a counselor. It's, I mean, mere disagreement has been medicalized. And what the science is showing is that this is the worst possible thing you can do for people. It's like, imagine, let's say someone's born to these like exceptionally neurotic parents who decide that the biggest mistake we can make is to ever take this kid out of the incubator, because our child is safe now. And whatever the child's going to lose by living his whole life or her whole life in an incubator, we have to do that. And so, you know, you get a child who, the moment that the kid gets out of the incubator, you know, probably gets at least, you know, 32 lethal diseases, which an ordinary person would just shake off. You know, your body would just reject it. And so the idea that people have to be protected from disagreement, they have to be protected from debate, they have to be protected on campus from, God forbid, anyone who's a conservative. And what they're showing is, actually, I've been studying these things in developmental psychology. They're trying to figure out why, like it was around 1995, 96, on American campuses, suddenly the kids flipped. It used to be, if you study the three main communities on campus, which are students, professors, and administration, that even when the administration wanted to restrict speech in some way, or the professors did, the students were always for free speech. Then around 1995, 96, it flipped, and the students demanded to be protected from anyone that disagrees with them. Because if someone disagrees with me, that's like, you know, that threatens my safety, it threatens my mental health. And so the psychologists like trying to figure out what happened. Where in the world did this come from? And they're tracing it, some leading scholars are tracing it to this shift in parenting philosophy, where you get what they call the helicopter parents. Like they just helicopter in. Oh my God, you know, it's like you have to protect your child at every moment. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, God help me if a teacher complained about me. Now, you know, the father goes to school and punches the teacher in the face. And so what's happened, and also children, it turns out, need a lot of time alone. They need a lot of time alone exactly so they develop the resilience and the inner strength to deal with teasing. I mean, obviously, there's a certain amount of bullying which is too much. I mean, you know, anything, if you take it too far, it can be really destructive. I'm not talking about people, you know, kids that are bullied into suicide. I'm not talking about that. That's a dangerous extreme. But in terms of the normal rough and tumble, give and take, you know, all of us at one time or another when we're kids learn to whom we should not lip off. You know, it's like, right? I mean, probably all of us when we were young, you know, kind of spoke back to the wrong person. And whoops, better not do that again. So, and what psychology shows, again, putting aside truly traumatic, dangerous extremes, but the normal give and take is absolutely necessary for the child to grow up emotionally healthy. And in the overprotective parenting style, which has become prevalent in the United States, and usually there's no bad idea that the United States will not enthusiastically export to the world. So I'm sure it's spread to other places. And so you get these children who are just helpless, basket cases, who are calling out the administration to protect them from differing viewpoints, who feel that they're actually in danger, they're medically in danger. They could suffer serious trauma if they're exposed. And to make sure that this doesn't happen, now on the left, students go to conservative programs and shout and yell or break windows or block the doors to prevent free speech. To prevent free speech. Just one little fact I pointed out yesterday, if you go to a university, typical university campus in Australia, America, anywhere, and you have a swastika armband, and let's say it's not Vedic, it's really just German. And you're not making a Vedic statement, you're making a, I mean, obviously it won't be appreciated. Probably you'll have a bad day. But if you go on campus and say you're a Marxist, that's kind of sexy still. Despite the fact that according to the statistics, the Marxists and communists in the 20th century killed about 5 times more people than Hitler. So you want to talk about, you know, political extremism and lunacy? About 5 times more people than Hitler, and yet it's still sexy on campus. So is the world mad? You betcha. So, and so now you have people who espouse, to some extent, the philosophy that caused the massacre of 100 million people in the 20th century, disrupting other views, even when they're conservative. I'm not talking about stupid conservatism like Trump. I'm not talking about stupid, I'm talking about smart conservatism. And there is actually a revolution of intelligent conservatism, which is science-based. So if it turns out that certain conservative views, say, for example, on human sexuality, the sanctity of marriage, and so on, if it turns out that social science is massively confirming that these more conservative moral positions give people a much better life, result in much better mental health, and that people who, let's say, reject these kinds of views are much more prone to suicide, to poverty, to antisocial behavior.
Has there been steps on that? Has it been?
Oh yeah, massive.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because on the sorry, I'm going into my rant here, but on the And I'm not, you know, I'm not like an American Republican. But the point is, on the right, there are people that deny science, science deniers when it comes to climate change. And on the left, there's massive science denial. Basically, any position which doesn't match the ruling ideology, you just deny it, no matter how much science there is to back it up. And so, in a sense, what we're proposing, I know in my own personal life, you're gonna be sorry you told me to speak as long as I want. You'll know. In my own personal life, everything I do, everything, I think I can say everything I do in my life, I do because I have a good reason for it. I actually don't do things for which I can't find a good reason. Even in the Hare Krishna movement. I mean, that's why sometimes I have these very subtle controversies. So, I mean, that's what it's really about, is having a rational life. And so what is our position on all these moral issues and political issues? We want to be reasonable, not dogmatic. I made that point yesterday about the pendulum. Krishna stresses moderation. If you go to an extreme, political extreme, religious extreme, you are creating an equal and opposite reaction. That's Newton's law of motion. And therefore, the more you go to an extreme, political, economic, military, religious, social, the more you go to an extreme, the more you are destabilizing your life. Because in the very act of going to an extreme, you are creating an equal and opposite extreme, even within your own psychology. I mean, I'll just one example. It's a tragic example. There was a lady in Los Angeles who became a devotee. And I mean, in fairness, she was, you know, not entirely healthy mentally. But she got married. She was so chaste. I mean, she literally would not look at another man. Like, she would never. Like, she would run away from all her men besides her husband, never look at another man. I mean, she was like, really, it was, even if you believe in chastity, it was like, seriously? I mean, she was really extreme. And then, you know, she had a mental breakdown, and then she became very promiscuous, and now is like the exact opposite of what she was. So much so that her child was taken away from her. So, I mean, obviously there are millions of examples of men. So, but my point is, that's what Krishna says in the Gita. Don't eat too much, don't eat too little. It's not like, I'm not my body, I'm going to starve myself. This is glorious. Krishna says, it's complete bona fide to laugh at my jokes, by the way. Complete bona fide. So Krishna says, don't eat too much, don't eat too little, don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. It's the balanced life that is sustainable. Moderation, balance, and that's actually sustainable. Any women have a question? Despite the fact I'm a proud male chauvinist, I think I should. No? Okay, men, yes? Yes, please. Yeah. Microphone? Microphone. That away.
Put your hand up there.
First, I would like to say obrigada.
Obrigado. De onde é você?
Ai, nossa, eu sou de Salvador.
Estava baiana?
Sim.
Meu Deus. Obrigado a você. Oh, in English? We do it in English?
Yes, of course. I'm feeling very honored to be able to ask you this question. It is a very personal one. I hope it's okay. I listened to both of your talks, and something that really touched my heart is this thought that you shared about how we have inability to honor God because we are, God forbid, I bow to the divine, and God forbid, that I believe in something that's higher than me, and that really resonates. Hit home God. And my logical brain likes to think of it as I'm responsible for my happiness, self. Ultimately, I'm responsible for my liberation, and I'm not going to give this job for you, Krishna, or to anyone else. You know what I mean? So I was just hoping they would have some words to share that would slowly help me guide me. Foreseeing my future.
Yes. Prazer.
Obrigada.
De nada, prazer. Mate saudades, né? Falar com brasileiro. Yeah, thank you for what you said. For example, I was very fortunate, I'm sure many of you were, I was very fortunate to have very loving parents, very good parents. And what studies show are that children need two things, love and boundaries. If you love a child, actually a child's brain, even if unconscious, a child's brain interprets too much permissiveness, too much boundaries as you don't love me. Because if you loved me, you wouldn't let me do this. And so when parents are too permissive, the child feels unloved. And in a sense, the child is unloved. Because when you really care about, so children need to be loved. They need a lot of love and affection. And one of the necessary ways that parents show that is by setting boundaries. And that's like our relationship with Krishna. And so it's interesting because Krishna tells us in these verses that we talked about tonight that you are responsible. And that's certainly true. And at the same time, he says, if you do the right thing, if you choose to do the right thing, I will reciprocate with you. I will reciprocate with you. It's like, for example, if your parents say, if you get good grades in school, tira boas notas, if you get good grades in school, then we will do this, that. But you have to decide. I'm not going to force you. But if you do this, you get this. If you do that, you get that. Now you choose what you want. So Krishna says, I will reciprocate with you. If you do the right thing, I will be there for you. If you choose me, I choose you. You know, it's interesting because when the famous verse where Krishna says, Jai Jata Mam Prapadyante, as all people approach me or surrender to me, literally as they approach me, I reciprocate with them. And the word which means reciprocate is bhaj, bhajami aham. Jai Jata Mam Prapadyante, tam sadaiva bhajami aham. You know, ham bhajami, it's the same like Govinda Madi Purusham Tam ham bhajami. Just like it means I worship. So why is Krishna saying, using that same word to say that I bhaj you? You know, and because the word in Sanskrit, I mean, it comes to mean worship, but it really means to reciprocate, to share. Like, for example, in Sanskrit, in the Mahabharata, a very common way that people ask someone else to marry them, you know, pop the question. A very common way they do it, if you want to know how to pop the question in Sanskrit, like really, you know, that's really cool. You can hire me as your marriage proposal consultant. And I will coach you on. So, but what they'll say is in Sanskrit, they'll say, Bhajaswamang bhajantam tvam, which means like, accept me as I'm accepting you. So, and that's what, in a sense, when Krishna says that as you approach me, I will bhajami aham, he's saying that I will accept you as you accept me. So we really choose the relationship with Krishna. Because Krishna respects our free will. So by choosing to be serious in your spiritual life, you are choosing to have a wonderful relationship with Krishna. Because you know that however sincere you are, Krishna will reciprocate. And then Hare Krishna. Yes.
Maharaj, I think this is a very nice point, especially in this time, as much as what Prabhupada brought to the West, an understanding of what we think of God, how we think of God. So basically, it's a beautiful thing. Somebody asked me a couple of days ago, how do you see God? Well, I don't see God, but I see what the spiritual master brought. And actually, as we understand that the spiritual master is by a medium.
Yes, transparent by medium.
Amongst that freedom,
Yes.
all we have to understand is what the Guru is giving.
Yes, I'm going to repeat that just because people who are watching here maybe didn't hear your question. If someone asked, what's your name?
Baladev.
Baladev. Someone asked Baladev, what was it again? Like, do you see God? Or
How do you see God?
yeah, how do you see God? And so Baladev was saying that I don't see God, but I see the spiritual master. I would say that I appreciate your humility, but at the same time, by the mercy of the Guru, you are seeing Krishna. For example, there's Krishna. And I think I can honestly say you would not be sitting here right now if you didn't see God there. If you came to the temple and every time you come, you didn't see God, you wouldn't be here right now. And actually, it's Prabhupada's glory that he insisted that we see Krishna. There's so many movements that came around that time in history. So many big gurus, and everyone has heard of those so-called big gurus, but no one has heard of Prabhupada. But everyone's heard of Hare Krishna because Prabhupada was pure. And because Prabhupada, I remember one time I was sitting in Los Angeles listening to Prabhupada's class, and he said something which really struck me, I never forgot it. He said that because the movement was really booming and growing, and he said, everywhere I go, people are saying to me, you've done such a wonderful thing, create this movement. And Prabhupada said, I say to them, what have I done? But he said, if you want to give me credit for something, this is the one thing you can say, this is the one credit you can give me, that I never tried to take Krishna's position. And if you think about it, none of us can honestly say that. I mean, every time we try to be the life of the party, which we do, we are, every time we try to be the center of attention. I mean, it's not like it's evil. It's not like going out and, murdering 1,000 children or something. But it's like, and I've actually made a distinction between philosophical atheism and psychological atheism. Philosophical atheism means you say there's no God or I don't believe in a God. That's philosophical atheism. Psychological atheism means that you may say you believe in God, but I'll say me. If you point your finger at somebody, you have 4 fingers pointing at you. There's a way around that, by the way. You point like this, and then you have 3 fingers pointing at them. There's always a way around everything. So, if I'm attached to being the center of attention, if I want to live in a world in which I'm the center of my own life, then psychologically, I'm attached to being God. So, in a sense, at the level of sadhana bhakti, we begin by philosophical theism. We begin by accepting that Krishna is real. We have experiences, and then we work on our psychology. So that so, I mean, the fact you're still here, the fact you've basically given your life to Prabhupada and Krishna, obviously is because you see Krishna through Prabhupada. And that's what Prabhupada wanted. Prabhupada would be very disappointed if you only saw him. Because when Prabhupada said transparent via media, if you said to Prabhupada, I see you but not Krishna, he would say, you didn't get it. Because I'm transparent. I'm just a lens through which you can see Krishna. And you do see Krishna, that's why you're here.
How we come to know Krishna.
Yes, of course, by the grace of the Guru. Jasya prasadat bhagavad prasadat. Yes. Oh, any women? Go ahead. Oh, do you want a microphone?
Mic's not working.
Mic's not working.
It's got to turn on. I just turned it down.
Could you maybe come a little closer, speak louder?
You mentioned that you take responsibility, and that it's our choice how we feel, and everything we do, we can't blame anyone. Our own decision how we choose to feel. At the same time, we hear from the Shastra that we are the product of the mercy of the devotee. So how do we, what's the psychology behind it? A healthy psychology of understanding that I am responsible for what I'm doing, but I'm also dependent on the society.
Very good question. How do we reconcile, or how do we bring together these two ideas that we're responsible for ourselves and we depend on the mercy of the devotees? Okay, I'll tell you a Prabhupada story, which I know is true because I heard it from someone that was actually there. Then he was an intelligent, sane devotee. And I heard it right after it happened. So I'm going to just bet on it. He was with Prabhupada. His name was Srinath. He's a very nice devotee who passed away many, many years ago, about 30 years ago or something. Cancer, but he was really nice, very nice devotee. And one time he was in Los Angeles, went to see Prabhupada. He was sitting with Prabhupada and Vishnu Swami. And Prabhupada said to Vishnu, "You're doing very nicely." And Vishnu said, "It's just your mercy, Prabhupada." Prabhupada said, "I offer my mercy to everyone, but you accepted it." So here's a hermeneutic principle. Hermeneutic means, it means like having a rational way to approach spiritual knowledge or sacred knowledge. We have a term we use, causeless mercy, right? Now, one really interesting thing about this English term, causeless mercy, is you don't find it in Shastra. There is no Sanskrit that literally means causeless mercy. So what's going on here? Why do we use a term that's not in Shastra? Another point I'll bring up, and then try to disentangle this view, is that to say causeless mercy in a sense is redundant. Because mercy is always contrasted with justice. If a judge is lenient with a convicted criminal to get a bribe, that's not mercy, that's commerce. Or if it's because it's, the convicted person is my cousin Louis. I mean, mercy means there's no selfish motive. If you are nice to someone with a selfish motive, that's not mercy. That's not what the word means. So in English, we have this term, Prabhupada used causeless mercy, to emphasize it. But here's, it's not that it's bad to say that, Prabhupada said it. But the point is, here's the hermeneutic principle. If you have a term, which we use, say, in English or some other language, which is not in Shastra, literally, you have to be very careful you have a Shastric definition for the term. And what's happened here, sort of going off the rails theologically, is that you take a non-Shastric term, causeless mercy, and many devotees give to it a non-Shastric meaning, which means you went through the rabbit hole. Then you are in Wonderland instead of Vedic culture. So, please laugh at my jokes, it makes me feel good. So, of course we need the mercy of the Vaishnavas, but Krishna says that you get the mercy as you deserve it. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita why people, or how people join him. In chapter 6, I think verses 43 and 44, Krishna says, we just read that last night, I'll read it to you. First of all, Krishna says, Jai Jatam Mam Prabhajate, you have to earn it. You surrender to me, I will accept you. Everyone gets what they deserve. If there was really, literally causeless mercy, let's say like, I'm so sinful, I deserve to be born. Devotees kind of use their creativity to think of the worst possible birth. Like I deserve to be born a blind, crippled cockroach in the stool of an atheistic camel or something. So there's this idea that I totally don't, but if that were true, if it were true that you really don't deserve anything, you don't deserve to be a devotee, that would mean that you reject several things that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. For example, Krishna says, I reciprocate with you. Krishna says, I'm equal to everyone. So let's say you were fallen, didn't deserve to be a devotee. Well, guess what? There's like billions of fallen people out there that don't deserve to be devotees. Why are they all going to hell? I mean, imagine a mother who has two children. They both do exactly the same thing wrong. And the mother gives candy to one child and slaps the other one in the face. They did exactly the same thing. What would you say? She's such a good mother. No, you'd think she's crazy. Someone needs to call the government, get the kids away from her. And so, in the same way, two souls, equally undeserving, one becomes an ecstatic Vaishnava, the other one goes to hell. But you say, oh, Krishna's such a good father. No, you're going to say God is crazy. So in Bhagavad Gita chapters, we got to be careful what we say. There's like there's a lot of urban legends in the Hare Krishna movement. Okay, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says about how you come to Krishna consciousness. And probably all of us, certainly most of us, we had the experience like, I can't believe I'm actually joining the Hare Krishna movement. Right? I can't believe I'm actually doing this. And look at the social cost. You know, what's my family going to say? And so Krishna talks about this very point. It's when you have your, oh my God moment, I'm joining Hare Krishna. And so the word Krishna uses is you're kind of like drawn into it involuntarily. Krishna actually says that. That you're kind of carried away involuntarily and you join the Hare Krishna movement. He actually describes this case. So in chapter 6, it begins when Arjuna asks what happens to someone who cannot complete their spiritual practice. They fall down from the practice. What happens to them? And Krishna says, don't worry, you know, everybody's a winner here in the Hare Krishna movement. And Krishna says, you know, you get a great birth, you go to the heavenly planets, or even better than that, you take birth in a devotee family. And then Krishna says, having taken birth in a good family, not necessarily a devotee family, but a good family. Like, for example, taking birth in Australia. So then Krishna says that Tatra, in that situation, you've taken birth in a good family. And you regain the spiritual understanding that comes from your previous body. It doesn't come from causeless mercy. I mean, obviously we did get the mercy of Krishna, but the reason we got the mercy, the reason we were able to understand that this is mercy, is because in our previous body, Krishna's word, Porvadehikam, we had spiritual understanding. We just didn't complete it. We didn't finish it. And then Krishna says, Yetate Chatu, and then you again try to be Krishna conscious. And the next verse, Krishna says, Purvabhyasena tenaiva. Like they say, if everything else fails, read the directions. And so Krishna says, Purvabhyasena, by your previous practice, meaning in your previous body. Abhyasa means sadhana. We use the word sadhana now. In the Gita, Krishna uses the term abhyasa. Sadhana is used later in history. So by your previous practice, and Krishna says, by that alone, driyate. Driyate is the passive form of the verb dri, like to take. Like Prabhupada said, hari means one who takes away our suffering. So that's the verb. It's actually pronounced her, like the English word her. And then harati, this is the passive, hriyate. He's literally, you're just kind of like taken away by it. Hriyate hiyavasho, indeed involuntarily. I mean, who would voluntarily destroy their social status by joining the Hare Krishna? You know? At least back when I joined, it was like that. So hriyate hiyavasho, vasha means control. And I always give the example, Krishna says in the Gita, Vashehi yasyendriyani, one whose senses are in control. So the word vasha means control. Avasha is used adverbially in Sanskrit to mean beyond your control. It's like, it's just involuntary, it just happened, beyond your control. And that's the word Krishna. He says you are carried away beyond your control, back into spiritual life. And he says that is by your previous practice and by that alone. It doesn't mean Prabhupada's not merciful. But I'll tell you another Prabhupada story. We were walking in Rancho Park. I had this amazing blessing from Krishna that Prabhupada used to go walk in my neighborhood park where I played baseball and tennis and swam. And I literally would walk with Prabhupada over the baseball field, past the tennis courts, and like, whoa. You know, because I was a young devotee. In fact, when I was young, you know, I was, I don't even say socially active. And fortunately, when I was growing up, I mean, boys and girls did not fornicate. You know, the world was still more decent when I was in, you know, high school. But I did go to parties, and I did fall in love basically every 2 weeks with someone. And so, anyway, so I went to these parties. You know, we danced and the whole thing. And so when I used to go to walk with Prabhupada at the park, we would literally, I would sit next to Prabhupada. We'd drive right past the houses where I went to parties. And then we'd go to the park, and I'd walk by all the fields where I played sports with Prabhupada. And so I just always thought it was like Krishna just erasing, like recording over something. It was so amazing. Karandar was a GBC in Los Angeles at the time, and he was a grihasta. So as a householder business, he would buy not new, but you know, late model Rolls Royces, and he would fix them up and then resell them. That was his householder business. So whenever Prabhupada came, he had like a really great Rolls Royce. And, you know, it's like, my God, it's how times have changed. I would be sitting next to Prabhupada in a Rolls Royce, driving past these houses, beautiful houses where I went to parties. And it was, wow, it's like, what if two worlds collide? So anyway, one time we were walking, and every other day Prabhupada would go to the park. The other day he would go to Venice Beach, where my mother took me when I was a kid. We'd park in the same parking lot and everything. And so, but one day Prabhupada was walking in the park, and when Prabhupada really wanted to make a point, he'd stop, like put his cane down. He'd make his point. So he stopped and he said that, he was quoting where Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that, Maya vaite nihata purvameva. I alone have already killed all these soldiers. You just be the instrument. But I remember when we were standing, you know, I can just see it. And then Prabhupada looked at us, and actually he took the part. He kind of acted out that conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. You know, he took Arjuna's part, then he took Krishna's part. And Arjuna, he said, Arjuna, I cannot fight Krishna. And then Prabhupada said, no, you must fight Arjuna. You just be the instrument. And then Prabhupada looked at us and he said, Krishna, just as Krishna already won the war, the battle of Kurukshetra, he's also going to spread his movement. Now, Krishna will give you the credit. He's going to do it, but if you volunteer, if you present yourself to Krishna, he will make you his instrument. And Prabhupada said, why don't you take the credit? Why don't you make your life glorious? Otherwise, Krishna will give the credit to someone else. But why don't you take the credit? And so in that sense, Prabhupada is a pure soul who fully surrendered to Krishna, who became Krishna's instrument, and therefore Krishna has given Prabhupada the credit. Just like Prabhupada told us, you become Krishna's instrument, he will give you the credit. It's right there in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is telling Arjuna to fight. Jasho labaswa. Krishna says in the Gita, you should achieve fame, achieve glory. It's the imperative verb. I mean, labaswa. It's a direct command. Achieve glory, fame. Krishna actually tells that to Arjuna, and then he says, technically, I did it. So that's just the wonder of devotional service. Krishna reciprocates, you get what you deserve, but Krishna is very merciful, and he empowers his pure devotees to bestow the mercy which you deserve. Maybe one or two more questions back there.
Is there a mic? I need a mic. Can you hear me? Okay.
Overtime, right? By the way, I get paid double overtime. If you can afford it, ask the question. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry I have to revisit this again. It's kind of a series of questions kind of maybe hammering me about this, but because I'm looking not to find a spiritual bypass, but to meet what is actually within me to be met. To meet within myself what needs to be met. And the only way I know to create a better life, this life that you spoke of implies actually an awakening, so probably a two-point question is to actually meet certain feelings in myself that have been in denial through love. And it hasn't mattered how much sadhana, how much prayer, how much meditation I've done. That I'm in the process of needing to meet certain emotions.
You mean like in a relationship?
No, within myself. I mean, some of us weren't loved and weren't given boundaries. We weren't loved, you were,
right,
and weren't given boundaries. So there's a different kind of challenge involved. And so it's about meeting those emotions.
Well, the good news is that Krishna supports you. Because when Krishna says, don't eat too much or too little, don't sleep too much or too little, then he says this extends to all human activities. We have certain emotional needs. And so in moderation, we should fulfill our emotional needs in a healthy, Krishna conscious way.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about it. It's about actually meeting, like the previous man here. It's
meeting what?
Meeting the emotions that are actually holding myself back from the glory of God.
Well, maybe give an example of such an emotion.
It could be intense jealousy, greed, feeling of isolation, abandonment. These things that are still carried somehow.
Right. Well, Prabhupada once said, I mean, he said it kind of in a very simple way. He said, if your body's sick, go to the body doctor. If your mind is sick, go to the mind doctor. And so it's not against our principles in the spirit of yukta vairagya to seek some kind of counseling. I mean, we had kind of like this bravado in the early days of the movement that, we have all we need. And devotees sometimes actually didn't go even to medical doctors. But so I would say you have to be practical. If professional help will help, then you should get it. You should just do whatever you need to do to be healthy.
So the second part of the question, in this reaching for a better life, which you've obviously succeeded in doing, was there a moment in your life when you matched the logos of God?
When I
matched the logos of God?
Well, I don't match Krishna in anything except that we both have two hands, I guess. But I would say that the secret of my success, well, that sounds like I'm successful, but tricky, isn't it? Like a minefield, trying to be humble and when you're not. Trying to pretend you're humble. Anyway. But I think what really has saved me always is I always knew, that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how frightening things are or things hopeless, I know that Krishna will save me. I know that if I take shelter from Krishna, he will save me. It's always knew that. And, you know, I've had moments where, I don't want to say Jesus, but, I mean, I've had moments. I mean, we all do. You can't, I mean, if you live a life in this world, then you go through all kinds of stuff. Everyone does. Yeah, it's like help. You know, it's really like that. Sometimes it's just help. I mean, you have to really just, because Krishna's a person. It's like, let's say, for example, you're in trouble, you need someone's help. You run up to someone on the street and say, like, help, you know, I need your help. It's just, it's not fancy. It's just really crying out to Krishna with all your heart. I mean, think of the residents of Vrindavan when there was a forest fire. They just cried out to Krishna. They just cried out to Krishna. And there's an important thing here, a distinction that has to be made. And that is, when it said we don't, hey, by the way, you're a great kid. You've actually sat through this whole thing. What's your name? Ashley. Yeah, I mean, thank you for staying through the whole thing. That's really impressive. You do? Hey, we'll play a duet later. So, we don't approach Krishna to satisfy our material desires, but there are some situations that are just so bad and so frightening, or just so difficult, that you have no choice but to cry out to Krishna. It doesn't mean you're approaching Krishna with a selfish motive. It's just some things are so shocking, there's just nothing else a living being can do. So when there was a forest fire, and the residents of Vrindavan just cried out to Krishna, it was that, oh my God, I thought they were pure, but they're asking Krishna to be the fire department. No, I mean, there's nothing impure there. Some things are just so hard and so shocking that there's nothing a person can do except cry out to Krishna. It's not like having a steady program, like, you know, every day I pray to Krishna, I want this kind of car, I want that kind of house. And so I think the more you just put aside everything, just really understand that Krishna's there, and just cry out to him with all your heart. I think that's all it is. Like the residents of Vrindavan did. Yes?
Just want you to take me out of Wonderland again. I heard an urban legend that Christ is like an avatar or incarnation of Krishna. Is that totally wrong?
I'm wondering how much to say, because I actually really have seriously studied early Christian history and in the historicity of Jesus. Okay, I'll say this. When I look at the life of Jesus, to some extent, filtered through the four Gospels, and I would say highly filtered through the fourth Gospel, the book of John. The other three, I think, are a little bit more accurate. And that's all, even back out, back then, everyone knew that the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, were actually more historically serious and less just sort of bending history to fit theology. And by the way, the fourth one is the only one that says, I'm the only way. The one which even in ancient times everyone knew is not precise history. So I admire Jesus very much personally. He chose to be initiated by an apocalyptic preacher, John the Baptist. Apocalypticism is basically that the world has gotten so bad, people are so evil, God's just going to hit the reboot button. And the world, as we know, it's going to be destroyed. It's like, let's try this again. And everyone who was a sinner is going to be really messed up. And the good people will be saved. Lambs and goats, don't be a goat. And so John the Baptist, have you ever seen those cartoons where some guy is walking down the streets of Manhattan wearing a robe and a beard? He's got a sign, the world's going to end, repent. That's apocalyptic preaching. And it's actually like that. You repent, sinners, and all that. So Jesus, at least again, according to the histories we have, and we assume that they're basically accurate, although some things maybe less so. But so he chose to be baptized by John the Baptist. And if you look at the Gospels, Jesus sometimes himself engages in apocalyptic preaching. like God's going to throw down from their thrones all the wicked rulers of the earth and all that. I mean, there's some truth in that, but it is, well, let's say it's tough love. And so, and Jesus also says, like, well, this is actually chapter 14 of the book of John. I have more to tell you, but you can't understand it now, which devotees think is an obvious prophecy of the Hare Krishna movement. But there's a different story behind that. It's actually that was put in there to justify the fact that the church was manufacturing new doctrines, and then they created, anyway, that's the whole story. As far as Jesus, I see him as obviously an empowered soul, as someone who definitely loved God, as someone who was an empowered representative of God. Avatara, like Shakti Avesh, I mean, you can certainly call him a Shakti Avesh avatar in the literal sense of the term, which means that Avesha means investing. And so that God invests his power in a person. And so Prabhupada is certainly in that category, and even some devotees. I mean, in a sense, all of us, when we preach successfully, Krishna is speaking through us, but, we're sort of like the junior, Mickey Mouse Club, Shakti Avesh avatar. Little, like, Shakti Avesh musketeers. So, and Jesus obviously is very powerful. I mean, Jesus himself, at least as he's quoted in the New Testament, acknowledges that he hasn't got the most brilliant crowd in the world, and there's only so much you can tell them. So, because Jesus acknowledges that, I mean, if you say, well, what would he have said if he had a sort of better audience? I mean, we can speculate on that, but how? So I sort of limit it to that. To me, Jesus is someone whom I sincerely admire. I mean, spiritually admire. Someone who made great sacrifice and obviously had very deep devotion. And I kind of leave it at that.
Why not?
Well, I can't say no. I mean, I just can't. Yeah, he was, in a sense, yes. In a sense, he did represent God powerfully. He did powerfully represent God to a certain group of people. And in a sense, if you look at the history, not so much now, but the previous history, it's like that bumper sticker they have that said, Jesus save me from your followers. So, it's, how should I put it? I think we can't blame Jesus, but I don't want to go into, because I know a lot about the history and how his movement was transformed into something else, how it became the most deadly institutional force practically in human history, and exactly how that happened and who did it. I mean, we can talk about that maybe sometime, but we can actually, as scholars, trace the history. What I'm saying now is not like some, shocking, wacko website. I'm sort of giving you mainstream scholarship. This is what you kind of hear if you went to any good university and took a course in it. So therefore, because as the book of Acts, the Acts of the Apostles, states, basically the direct followers of Jesus who lived with him were illiterate peasants. And that's right in the New Testament itself. And that's why the Gospels were written a few generations after Jesus in a different language. And, it's the old telephone game. And so that's a whole topic which scholars have been wrestling with for a century or two, the search for the historical Jesus. Because we can't just reject all of it. For example, we have contemporary Roman historians who had no religious interest in Jesus. They were just writing history, and they say that there is a preacher named Jesus from Nazareth, and his followers claim he's a miracle worker. And so those are contemporary or near contemporary. So there's a historical basis for it. And as far as exactly what Jesus said and what was added later, because his movement was absolutely paganized. I mean, one obvious example of how the movement was paganized is the first sentence of the book of John, where in an attempt to, like sometimes we say, we want to preach to intelligent people. In the first sentence of the book of John, whoever wrote that, we don't know, it's written by someone named John. The first sentence is, in the beginning was the Logos. And so did Jesus actually get into sophisticated pagan philosophy? Probably not. But there you have it, pagan philosophy in the first sentence of John. In the beginning was the Logos. Trying to appeal to Greco-Roman intellectuals who did that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that's a very big academic area, like, trying to reconstruct, or can we reconstruct a reliable history of what really happened. I think to some extent we can, to some extent we can't. So I just leave it at that. That, I mean, Jesus was obviously, really admirable representative of God that deserves a lot of honor and credit. And the stuff that happened later, again, people claim to be his followers, becoming the single most deadly institution in human history because it lasted so long. That's another story. Yes. Maybe the last question, then we'll do what Hare Krishnas do best. We'll eat. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, but after you can. Last two questions.
So you're referring.
You mentioned the moderation, how not to eat too much, not to sleep too much,
right.
All of that. But at the same time, when you look at the Mahaprabhu's
the what?
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's history,
right.
How sometimes for days they didn't sleep. So obviously that's transcendental.
Say he wouldn't sleep.
Sorry.
You say he wouldn't sleep for days?
Yeah, well, there was a case where for 3 days and 3 nights.
Yeah, or like his followers would eat almost nothing. Well, to be honest, that was their moderate. They were eternally liberated souls. Lord Chaitanya is God, and that was their moderate.
So again, of course,
yeah, it's like in yoga class. Everyone has their own stretch, right? Like, if I try to stretch like the person next to me, I'll basically cripple myself. So yeah, everyone has their own moderate. Yes?
So you were referring a lot to, just before to cross-referencing the historical existence. You were referring just before the historical cross-referencing of existence of Jesus. Obviously, Christianity will collapse if somebody actually prove that Jesus didn't exist, for example. From our perspective of our Dharma, whether some stories, Quranic stories, were historical stories or not, it wouldn't really affect the philosophy and the practice. So in that context, and in the context of rationalism that we were referring to a lot before, I want to ask you how you view the role and how we should study the Quranic stories, for example, for rational people who science them as myths.
Okay.
Convey some message.
Okay. Yeah, as rational people, how should we deal with the Quranic stories? First of all, thank God, our Vaishnava tradition has a somewhat sophisticated hermeneutic approach. For example, the Chaitanya Charitamrita says there are illusory stories in Shastra, like Krishna's queens being kidnapped, or the Yadu Vangsha, civil war, and all these things. So some stories are recognized as illusory, some things are allegorical, and some things are just straight history. And so if you look at the Mahabharata, which is itihasa, which means it's history, at the same time Madhvacharya, and here I have to invoke the ancient principle, don't kill the messenger. But Madhvacharya, in his book he wrote on the Mahabharata, said that the Sanskrit text that he had 800 years ago was thoroughly corrupted. Not the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is not a corrupt text, even from an academic standpoint. And that's why Lord Chaitanya placed so much emphasis in the Bhagavatam. Mahabharata, if you read the whole Mahabharata in Sanskrit, you'll see it immediately. I mean, it's kind of obvious. But, so yeah, Krishna is a real historical figure. And as far as all the Puranas, for example, the 6 Goswamis sometimes quote in their books a Purana, and if you look at that Purana today, you don't find the verse. So there's been corruption even since the time of Lord Chaitanya. And that's why the Bhagavatam is so important. That's why H.D.Goswami, when he wrote his Sat Sandarbhas, 6 Sandarbhas, and then the Tattva Sandarbha means it's kind of like his epistemology, like his philosophy of knowledge, Tattva. And Jiva Goswami said ultimately that our central source of knowledge is Bhagavatam. So in my own work on Mahabharata, I take the Bhagavatam as a gold standard. So even though the Mahabharata may be somewhat corrupted, but the Bhagavatam I accept. And fortunately, the Bhagavatam gives all the headlines from Mahabharata many times. So yeah, so we stick to the Bhagavatam. Whatever's compatible with the Bhagavatam is okay. So thank you all very much.
Hare Krishna. This is not a question, so I'm trying to slip this one in. Could you just tell us why you come after 33 years to Australia?
After 33 years, what?
Why you come to Australia after 33 years?
Oh.
Why did it take so long? What was the inspiration now to come?
I think my misfortune that I didn't come sooner. But it's, thank you. I mean, I want to be kept. No, but I really, you may not believe this, love at a distance, but actually all those 33 years, I always had in my mind Australia. That's the place I really want to go. I swear to Krishna, I mean, really. And China. Yes, China. No, China is a very important, great country. I guess I'm a little self-indulgent, so I want to become to Australia. But yes, China's a great country. But I really did. And for example, the first letter Prabhupada ever wrote me was, he told me to complete my academic education because I'd written to him. And I dropped out because I couldn't do it. I was a new devotee. I was like, it was crazy. I went to a physics class. This is in UC Berkeley. University of California is one of the top physics departments in the world. I was in a class and they said, what's the definition of energy? Take a test. And I wrote down, energy is the potency of the Supreme Personality of God in Krishna. Superior potency is the living entity. And when the teacher marked it wrong, I was outraged. But as my friend Reciprocation would say, it was not a cult. And then I went to my French class. I had an advanced French class. And the teacher, there were no laws back then about, sexual harassment and all that. So it was a teacher from Paris, and he met and exceeded one's expectations about Parisian men back in those days. And so what he'd do is, to illustrate principles of French grammar, he would call up the prettiest girls in the past. He would literally waltz with them across the room. I swear to God, he did this. And so, of course, I was outraged. He was probably, more moderate than I was, like 72 hours before. But I was, because I just joined the movement. But I was absolutely outraged by his decadent behavior. So he said, 20-year-old male, not even close to having a fully formed brain. And so the teacher said, I want to see how well you know French. I want everyone to give a little 5-minute talk in French. Who wants to volunteer? Nobody volunteered. I volunteered. Yeah, I'll do that. So I went home, got out my dictionary, hogs, dogs, camels. And I went back to the French class the next day, and I, gave this talk, and almost to my dismay, the teacher liked it. We were revolutionary. I went right from the streets of Berkeley, to the temple. So, to make a long story short, and we had no mature devotees. There was no one there to put their arm around my shoulder and say, can we talk about this? And so I ended up dropping out. And yet Prabhupada had given me that order, and so I was haunted by that order, because Prabhupada told me to finish college. He said, I want you to get a good education so you can preach to other educated people. And so I would have dreams about it. You know the dreams you have where you have to go to class and you're late or you didn't turn in your paper and so. So I wanted to go back to school, and it got to a point where I was just like desperate to go back, and yet in my heart, I knew Krishna wasn't telling me yet. And I kept waiting and waiting. I just knew in my heart that Krishna has, it was not allowing me to do it. In fact, when I became temporarily GBC in Berkeley in 1980, because the GBC guru there had, anyway, that was back in those days. So I went to walk on the campus at Berkeley, and I was like, oh my God, I wanted so badly to go back to college. I was starving for it. And I even thought I'm gonna get readmitted to Berkeley, and I'm not gonna tell anyone, and I will just tell everyone every day I'm going for a japa walk, and I will like go into a bathroom, change into fruit of worker clothes, and I threw the F-bomb just there, fruit of worker. So, and I actually applied to Berkeley, was readmitted, it was the top school in the country, top public university. I got readmitted. And in those days, I mean, this, you can absolutely believe this. If it would have come out that I was, as a biggest guru, Fab 11, GBC, if it would have come out that I would have gone back to school, there would have been an emergency GBC meeting. I would have been suspended from all my positions. I would have been put on probation. It would have been like a major scandal in ISKCON. As if I'd like, did you hear what he did? He went out and killed a cow or something. And so he went to the slaughterhouse. So I enrolled. I was actually accepted by Berkeley, and I wanted so bad. I just knew in my heart, Krishna's not. It's not the time. It's not the time. So I waited and waited and waited, and then finally, one day I was in anyway my place in LA, the LA area. It was actually Beverly Hills, but I learned not to say that because then people think I'm fallen. But it was a family apartment that I was given. So one day, Krishna just told me so clearly, unmistakably, now's the time to go back to school. He just told me so clearly, and I thought, well, what if I don't go back? And literally, I started to go crazy. Then okay, I will go. And then I was like happy, lucid, Krishna conscious, and Krishna was just telling me, you have to go back. So I went to UCLA, because it's the same University of California. And I stood in line. And I was waiting in line to talk to a counselor about, and I was an ISKCON guru. I was God on earth. And here I am. Here I was, standing in line with all these young students, and I thought, what am I doing here? So I was thinking that, is this really Krishna's plan? Just I thought that, this true story. I looked over at the wall, there was a huge panel, frame, and there was a huge picture of Krishna smiling at me. World culture. It was a huge picture, and so then I thought, okay. And then, so then it came my turn. They would send you to all these different counselors. So by Krishna's arrangement, they sent me to the lady who was in charge of the whole arts and sciences counseling thing. She was like the big leader. And she really liked me, and she learned that I'd studied Indian philosophy and I was practicing bhakti yoga. And it's extremely competitive to get into these schools. These are the most competitive public schools in America. And so she just said to me, oh, I just want to talk to you about your spiritual practice. You don't have to. So she rang a bell. She called one of her assistants, gave him the application, and said, "Could you please run this through for Mr. Essing?" Didn't he want me to have to wait in line or anything? And then so she just wanted to talk to me about Krishna consciousness. And then her assistant came back 20 minutes later. She just stamped it and said, "Welcome to UCLA." And so these things kept happening. So I went to UCLA, and then they had what they call a graduate school fair. Because I was an undergraduate, finishing up undergraduate. Because before I joined the movement, I was regularly flunking classes. Let's just say I was distracted. And so they had a graduate student fair at UCLA where all these top schools send, the representatives. They put a little table, and they recruit good students to come to grad school. So somehow or other, Krishna just told me, I mean, it really was Krishna. He just said to me, you're supposed to go to Harvard. So I just went to the Harvard table, didn't even bother going anywhere else. And then a disciple of mine who passed away, Bhakti Vihara, she was traveling around America getting reviews for my Mahabharata translation. So she went to Harvard and she met the chairman of the Sanskrit department. And she said, you know, my guru, my spiritual master should come to Harvard because, you know, he's at UCLA now, blah, blah, blah. And the chairman of the department, who's this world famous scholar, said, well, that's interesting, you know, tell him to apply. And so I applied. I got into 2 separate Harvard programs. I had to choose one and reject one. 2 separate schools, and then I just kind of zoomed through. I got it was announced at the graduation. I got the fastest PhD in the history of my department, which was hey, how old are you? Hey, thanks for coming. So it was just all magical. For example, they had this one, someone announced, they had this one test that everyone dreaded. The test you had to pass, where they give you some Sanskrit without the dictionary, because Sanskrit has been used as a learned language for thousands of years, and so the vocabulary is like ridiculous. That's why you look up a word in the Sanskrit dictionary, and it means like the essence of the soul, pomegranate, the hoof of a camel, and so when you have to translate Sanskrit, I mean, the dirty little secret is that no one translates Sanskrit without a dictionary. And yet you have to do it without a dictionary. And the students are so terrified of this test that they actually tell the students, you don't have to translate everything. You know, you don't have to, just show us that you kind of know what's going on. So I went to take that test that everybody dreaded. And I was translating the Mahabharata to them, and they gave me a Mahabharata section. Oh, you know, I already translated it. I mean, it's just Krishna. So normally you're supposed to translate like 3 verses maybe. And they're sweating over it. And so when I got to about 30, my arm started to hurt. And so I said, I'm going to stop now. So, you know, I was getting writer's cramp. And it was kind of perfect translation. So, and it was really Krishna. After that, I mean, just one last. I mean, it's anyway. There's other things. It's just Krishna made amazing arrangements. My oral exams were amazing. They asked me some questions, and they kind of looked at each other and said, "He knows all this. Tell us about the Hare Krishna movement." So. I mean, I did answer the questions. I did take the test. I mean, it was a real test. But anyway, it's but the lesson I learned from all that, because I really know it was Krishna. I mean, it could have been an absolute catastrophe. Everything could have been exactly the opposite. You know, same humble me. So, like H.D.Goswami says, you know, I only made one mistake in my whole life. One time, I thought I was wrong. But I wasn't. Trinata, peace, and chain. Anyway, so the lesson I learned from that is, I wanted to do something. I wanted to do it so badly. I mean, more than anything in the world, I wanted to do it. But I knew in my heart that it's not the time. Krishna is not giving me the green light. I knew in my heart that Krishna is not telling me to do it. And so I waited, and then when it finally happened, it was beyond my expectations. And I always understood, because I trusted Krishna. Because I trusted Krishna, no matter, I wanted it so badly, but I trusted Krishna. And then it happened beyond my expectations. Hence, or similarly, Australia. And also, I want to thank Madhuri, who's helped so much, and Padma. When I was first starting to plan to go to Australia, you know, at my age, I do things extremely quickly. 2 years to just, you know, book the flight. So, but Padma did a lot of work. She helped a lot and drove around in her very expensive yellow European sports car. So I'm grateful to all the devotees that helped. Many devotees are helping me, and see you guys later. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.